Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new week. Hope you're all surviving. What's going on out here? We have today Richard Schulman, who, as I mentioned, is a mega agent and also one of the funniest people, I think, in KW. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his business out in LA and how he and his team are, working through this whole craziness. So, Richard, let me turn it over to you. Give us a little bit of a background about who you are and what your team's all about.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. Good morning, everyone, and hope you guys are all doing okay over there. Fortunately, we did have a little scare on the team with a couple people who probably impacted, but everyone right now is doing well, so that's good.
Good.
And thank you, Sandy. I used to be a mega agent until Seth and I were just chatting until I canceled most of my escrows and listings this past week. So they might knock me down a peg after this. I'll kind of go over what we do as a team, and then very open, obviously, for questions. I've never really taught in this environment before. Normally, when I talk to offices and teams and such, my big thing is social interaction as a lead generation tool, and obviously that's just not even close to possible in our current situation. So it was a great strategy until it wasn't. So I'll give you a little bit of background. This is my 17th year in real estate. This is my 13th year with KW. I'm really glad to be here. Obviously, I am very into all the training. So I love when teams and offices are doing training like this because we can always sharpen our axe. One of the things I tell my guys are there's only two variables that you as agents can control about your business is the amount of time you work and the quality or the skill of the work that you do. And so I think none of us want to work more. So it's just about how do we improve the quality and skill. You're not going to learn that much from me, just by the way. So just FYI. So about 2 years ago, we got really frustrated with Zillow. I was spending like 10 something a month, 12 a month with Zillow, Yelp, Realtor, Trulia. You guys have all seen that model. We were doing fine. We were net positive on that investment. I just didn't like that money going out for all the reasons we all know. And I decided I sort of reached this inflection point in my business. And I decided I could either go, one way, and I could double my Zillow spend, and I could try to reach that next echelon of producers, or I could go the other way and just get rid of all the spend. And we cut all of our spend. We basically spend under 1% of GCI on new lead acquisition, and that's mostly just mailing to our sphere of influence. So what I usually talk about is how we really don't spend any marketing money. We don't make fancy flyers. We don't geographically farm. We do very little Zillow, Trulia, Realtor, Yelp spend right now, about 3 a month or less, I think. And we're really just focused on farming our sphere of influence. So that's usually what I talk about. When we made that change a couple years ago, obviously I was nervous because it was a big, that year, the last year we were with Zillow, we had done 18 deals with Zillow. Oh, and for context, our average is like 145 to 165 transactions a year. And depending on the market and the price point, we've been in the 125, $135 million price range or volume. When we cut Zillow, we actually saw our sales increase a little bit and our expenses decreased. So you can do the math on profitability. Yeah.
Can you just give us a little bit of a description of what your team looks like? How many people, structure-wise?
Thanks for cutting me off.
Yes.
I felt like I might have been going on a little bit there.
No.
So right now, basically the change that we made is that we decided to reinvest that money into human capital versus marketing capital. So right now we have 3 really high-end full-time in-office employees, well, at-home employees now, but we went really high-end. So my number 3 employee is now making basically more than anyone else I've ever had. So obviously the other 2 people are also making more than anyone else I ever had. And by a good amount for them. So we have 3 full-time in office. We have an outside coach that we pay a commission override to. We have a transaction coordinator. I don't know how your terms may or may not be different, but all the paperwork we have done outsourced, which is cheaper than having it done in-house by a lot. And then we have myself as sort of like a sales manager type role. And then my wife does like bookkeeping and some back end stuff. So the way I look at it, when you add up the 3 employees, the TC, and then like say me and my wife, we're at like 5.5 full-time employees. And then we have about 12 salespeople on top of that. 3 weeks ago, we had 8 agents. This is, 3 weeks ago, we're talking about beginning of March, right? We had 8 agents who were past their April goals. So that the model was working really well. And then, well, now it's not. So that's sort of the overview. So we have about a half an employee basically per agent, and we have about 8 to 9 productive agents and a few new agents. We actually onboarded a new agent on Thursday, so I have a contract out to another one. So hopefully that's a good overview.
Yeah, definitely. And the 3 employees, what are their roles?
So I have a lead admin who does, I don't like to do the hiring, like that process, so I don't really get involved in it. So he manages the other 2 admin, and he does all the hiring. Or I think actually one of the other admins now is sort of like taking over that role from him, and he's in charge of the contracts. But we were in the middle of sort of redefining all of our roles before everything went down. But the lead admin basically supervises the other 2, handles hiring, takes that whole world away from me, supervises the brand new agents, so I'm not the one getting to like, how do I write an offer call? We have basically a lead gen manager who basically monitors all the lead flow, and then a listing manager, and they both pick up some variation of all the other things that fall in between those 2 roles.
Very cool. Okay. And so you started telling us about the shift over, and so what was your lead gen? What did it look like on a daily or weekly basis before all this stuff went nuts?
So I mean, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, and hopefully, not too long from now, I'd like to get people back to. We're doing a lot of social engagement dates. It was basically like Sandy and I. It doesn't matter how we knew each other. You could be my wife's friend or coworker. You could be from my old job 3 jobs ago. Basically, everyone in our database. It was just a constant flow of coffee dates. Quick interactions at the house. It's like, how could I meet with, 10 people a week just face to face? Because that's where the business happens, right? And what we would do is we were all in the office Monday, basically prospecting all day to fill our week with appointments. And you guys know this. I mean, there was a straight line between the production and the number of prospecting calls that people were making, right? It was just a direct correlation. I mean, there's always like the new guys were making way more calls, and the experienced guys have much stronger books. Like Seth probably doesn't prospect too hard, but he has a nice book of business. Is that right, Seth?
He's on mute right now, but he's agreeing.
Thumbs up, Seth.
It was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea was we would be all like, we're a very spread out office. I imagine you guys have this challenge too, that we're in LA and my farthest agent is driving. I've got 2 agents driving an hour each way, maybe 3 really. I've got another one driving 45 minutes. Even my closest ones are driving. For me to commute to the office is 45 minutes a day total, and I'm not so far away. So it was just one day on Monday, which is today. Today's our Monday schedule, and we're prospecting all day long to get appointments for the rest of the week. Now we're taking them over the phone or doing them live on the phone. But we used to, and hopefully we'll get back to it, just be a constant stream of, hey, do you want to grab coffee? Hey, do you want to get a lunch? Whatever, anything like that.
Now that's really interesting, because I would assume that a lot of people, including me maybe, in the past would have had a limiting belief around the idea of why would they want to have coffee with me if they're not really doing, if they haven't raised their hand at this point and stuff. So how do you motivate them to want to actually sit and talk to you?
So, well, I'll put it a couple ways. So first of all, everyone on my team got constricted to 1,000 people in their database, right? And remember, the goal is not to have coffee with 1,000 people. The goal was always to make calls to the 1,000 to get your top 200 to 400. So if you guys read the MREA book, there's an agent in there named Christina Martinez, and Gary talked about her at a mega camp a couple of years ago. Gary said Christina had like 200 people in her database. I think that was the number, but it was the right 200. So the goal is really, okay, I've got 30 people on the screen here, I think. how do I call these 30 to find like the 6 people who want to be my, my acquaintance, and then how do I keep a relationship with them? Because what we know about real estate, you guys have probably experienced this if you're prospecting right now, is I'm having a lot of people call me and say, I want to sell my house. I need to sell my house. I'm certainly having a lot of people pop out of the woodwork. I just got off the call with a friend of mine. He was literally about to build a house, like sign a contract to build a new home. And now he's like, I can probably just buy an existing house at a discount. So people become buyers and sellers of real estate when there are sudden changes in their lives. And sudden changes are not always good, right? So sudden changes like birth, usually birth is good, right? Death, divorce, marriage, pandemic, whatever it is, job transfer, financial circumstances. So the idea is really just how can Seth and I be in relationship so that when, Seth is like, I love my condo, I'm never moving, but if any one of those 7 things happen to him, all of a sudden he's a buyer or a seller, even though he's in his head, Seth is like, I'm never moving, right? But things happen, right? And so the idea was if we could be in front of our top 200 to 400, we would never have to really do anything else, right? If I could just have my top 400, I work a database of about 202 people, I think. And all I have to do is just stay on top of those people, call them all quarterly, meet with them all as much as possible. And then that's where all the business comes from. And so it's just people in your life and staying in front of them.
And do you supplement that with monthly newsletter, emails? What sort of stuff do you do in addition to that to stay?
So we do probably like 8 emails a year, but I don't know what you guys are seeing. My email response rate is like, we just can't get people to respond to emails anymore. I don't know what it is. It used to be if I sent out 20,000 emails to the whole database, I would get, 30, 40, 50 responses. Half of them are like, take me off your list, but now people reply. Now we're doing a lot more text messaging, and even that's like, we're seeing that like kind of trend down as far as response rate. But let's say 8 global emails. And I always say this, like, none of this like daylight savings time stuff, Thanksgiving recipes, sports schedules, like people don't want that. Like I write thoughtful emails. I'll get like a lender to write a blurb about the market or whatever. I'll get like my estate attorney to write some content once a year or something like that. One of my most popular things, oddly enough, is notepads. So I have like 1,200 mailing addresses for like our past clients. I send out a notepad quarterly with a really nice, thoughtful letter about the real estate market. I don't push or hype. It's not like this is an amazing time to buy and sell. It's like, no, just like here's what I see objectively happening in the market. And if you have a question, call me. And people will then call. And that's how when I say I farm a sphere of influence, which to me is like way more efficient than farming like a condo building or a neighborhood or however you do it in New York.
But that's amazing to hear somebody you've really picked one lever for your lead gen being calls and meetings, right? And you're still pulling 145, you said, transactions a year.
Yeah.
Just from that out of a database of a few thousand people.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So and some people are newer or they don't have the business where they want it to be. We did a fair amount from open houses, at least at pushing people into the database. And then because we have a good listing volume, a month ago at least we were getting a couple hundred inbound leads a month. So we could always replenish the supply of people. We're always looking to sort of push people through our pipeline, right? It's like new leads come in and dead leads fall out, right? Someone sells and moves out of state, dead lead out of the bottom. Someone's phone number gets changed, so we're always pushing people through. You can't just sit on the 200, right? Because eventually you get enough Seths, and like, if Seth is, never moving out of his house, maybe he goes down to a 2% chance of selling, and you take someone else who's like 30 and just got married, and the chance they do 3 transactions in the next 15 years with you is pretty high. So you have to keep pumping those, people in to top grade or improve the quality of your database. Sorry to pick on you, Seth. I don't know anyone else on the call. About.
It's okay. Seth's used to it.
Yeah.
A couple of questions that came from the group chat. Let me just go through those right now.
Yeah.
Are your outsourced people licensed or unlicensed, and are they in the U.S. or abroad?
So we tried, I think, Filipino VAs. We tried Indian VAs. it never, I mean, we can never get it to work. We even tried a VA in Oxnard, which is like Long Island for you guys, probably like an hour and a half away. And just not being able to like engage with someone and manage them. I know there's teams out there, maybe Sandy, you've had them on, and they have 14 VAs. Look, I had a big revelation when I went to hiring higher end staff. It's like the little amount of money you have to pay extra relatively compared to the price points that you guys are working at is just worth it. To save $3 an hour on a VA to go to the Philippines versus someone who's like on my time zone, English is the first language, understands our cultural and business customs here. I just like having live bodies around because like you never know when you're like every time we hire a new runner, which is like the bottom position, like it's always like 4 days before they end up showing a property. Like you just never know when you need like a human body somewhere, or they're printing something and driving it across town for a presentation. So everyone's licensed. Our TC is licensed. He's in office. It's just a guy who was made his own business inside the office. So I just think that you should not be skimping on human capital. You should be going like full fare. And here, I'm sure you have the same, regulatory environment. Everyone has to be licensed. Everything has to be completely like above board. We're not looking to get stung by an unlicensed person doing something silly. Our DRE, BRE here is really brutal.
Yeah. California is definitely, I think, the worst in the country in terms of restrictions and limitations. But
yeah,
on the same level, it probably makes the quality of the agent a little bit higher there than maybe over here. No? Oh, no. Oh.
That was funny. It was a joke. I liked it.
There you go.
It's still, you need 70% on a multiple choice test to get your license here.
So. Seth asked, Richard, do you mind speaking on salary range since your market is similar to ours?
I don't really talk about salaries, but I mean, I would like vaguely say like 6 figures is what you're looking at for a top end assistant. Plus. They want bonus. They want profit share. They want to do their own sales. Actually, interesting note, when you hire more highly paid assistants, this is really relevant for our markets. When you hire more highly paid assistants, they actually do transaction volume. So I can't see my numbers now, but my lead admin, by virtue of him being more highly paid, he's more in, his sphere group is also more highly paid. So I think he's done 4 or 5 transactions this year. I mean, he's probably like a number 4 salesperson. And my number 2 assistant, the same thing. And she's closing a 1.5 tomorrow, So, they offset some of their expenses. But I mean,
and I can actually tell you similar to that. Our DOO has closed some of our biggest deals over the last couple of years. Just doing it out of her own sphere. So
yeah, but I'll tell you, in Los Angeles, I mean, you couldn't get someone to be a receptionist for under maybe $45 a year. Okay. I mean, and we'll see if and how that changes, in the future. The labor market's going to change a lot. Everything's going to change a lot. So we just don't know what that looks like. But for today, it's a fair, it's a pretty high salary just to get someone in the door.
Yep. From Lady, she asks, what parameters do you use to designate who is in your top 200?
Well, it's a little interesting question. So for me, I've been doing this a long time, and I would not say that I'm like passionate about selling real estate personally. Like I do enjoy it, but 15 years ago, I was, my mid-20s and single and no kids, and I didn't mind showing property all day Saturday and Sunday. Fortunately, my business is to the point where my team members can do that. I don't have to do that. So I'm just trying to work with my closest friends and it's just basically a math problem. It's like I do a lot of investment brokerage. And so, if Seth is my friend and he wants to buy a $500,000 condo, I'm going to refer him to someone else. And if Teresa is my friend and she's buying 3 rental properties a year, you're just like next up on my screen, Teresa. I'm going to, if she's doing 3 deals a year, I'm going to keep that client. A, she wants to work with me, and B, it's high value enough. So, I don't really show a lot of properties. Like if Casey and Jonathan wanted to buy a $4 million house, I would go show them a property, right? But I'm just trying to really be most time efficient. And also, the most important thing I'll share, if you have a team or even if you have just one junior, it's like you can't cherry pick all the deals. You can't keep all the good deals. So, I hand out we had a 2-6 deal that we double ended. That was a lead I just gave out to an agent on my team to handle. I wanted him to, for him to make that money and have that success, because it's better for all of us that way. So for me, it's just a math problem of like, if I want to work as little as possible and make as much as possible, on the sales side, I'm still working quite a bit on, managing the team. Who are the people who will accomplish that for me?
Makes sense. Seth, I don't quite understand your next question here, so do you want to unmute yourself and ask it? What percent of your volume is based?
That you got away from spending for lead gen. I know you're pretty lean, and you coached me for a little while, full disclosure.
Before you fired me, right?
But I know that you're all about putting in the time with lead gen. What percent of your GCI is actually spent on the business, would you say? Obviously your big numbers were, according to MREA, it's like 60% becomes spent, but I know that you're much leaner than that.
So we're over target on profitability, but because I'm in production, so I don't know the answer. I mean, just off the top of my head, our salaries are probably the 10 to 12% range, and trying to think. I mean, we probably spend 25% on costs, office costs, licensing, cap fees, all that stuff, including salaries and marketing. And then the rest is just on human capital. Like our coach gets 5%. And so we're probably somewhere in the 30% range on expenses, more or less. And that's before we pay the agents and pay me. I don't know if that's helpful or not. I don't have it really broken down very well like that.
Sure.
May I add something, Sandy?
Yeah, please.
Something that I learned, like, I'm not really a numbers tracker. I mean, I know that we wanted to get our ad spend to 0. Something that really helped me is years ago, one of my coaches came up with this idea. Like, he was like, you got to track your appointments and your contracts and percentage of this. And I'm not saying don't do that if that's your thing. It's definitely not my thing, and it was just not going to happen. We came up with this thing at my office, my actual office, not this office. I had taped to the wall. It just said, I just figured out we needed $15 million pending at all times. If we had $15 million pending, we would close about $10 to $12 million a month, and that would pay all the bills, and that would pay me what I needed to get. So as far as metric stuff, like I just chose to focus on that metric of like 15 million pending at a time, and the world is good.
Which is amazing.
If it's not, you got to pick up the phone. Sorry, Sandy.
No, it's okay. I mean, one of the things I love about these calls and the different folks that I've talked to, especially as I get to know more folks in Gary's Top Agent Mastermind, is that there is no cookie cutter, right? We all understand the models and work the systems, but yet we all also kind of strike a balance of creativity or style for ourselves, saying, hey, this is what works best for me and my team. So it's not just one road that gets you to the, to the end of the line. And it's fascinating to hear how you're doing it in a very different way than some of the other folks that we've talked to, which is great.
Who is the best so far, Sandy?
I don't want to embarrass you, so I'm not going to say. How long were you a solo agent, and what was the first position that you hired?
Well, so we don't have time for all of my story, but basically I started at a major brand, and there was no training. I moved to KW. I had no concept of training because my old company had no training. So why would I go to training now? I was doing okay just by sort of, brute force efforting the whole thing. And then I finally got into training about 6-7 years in, and it sort of coincided with a couple of things. One was I went to Europe for 2 weeks with a friend, and my office, I was doing 2, 3, 4 deals a month at this point, and my office manager, like the team leader, he said, I am requiring you to hire someone to cover there's no way you can leave the country. I didn't even have email on my phone at this point, right? So he's like, you have to hire. So I hired someone part-time because I was trying to save money, and she ended up working for me for 5 or 6 years as an assistant. So the first hire is always an assistant. and that's sort of like all that happening at once. At the same time, my team leader gave me a free ticket to family reunion, and that got me really involved in like the training world of KW. So that all sort of coincided about 6-7 years in. Had I done it the right way, so like if it was a new agent asking, I mean, getting involved in the training is the easiest thing to do, and then hiring an assistant is a no-brainer. By the time you're doing $8, $9, $10 million in sales volume a year, is your average 2.5%, right?
Yeah, you too.
By the time you're making 200 a year plus, 250 a year, you should be hiring, an entry to mid-level assistant to help you grow your business. And so when I finally hired that assistant, my business like really took off. And then I quickly after that, we had like 3 buyer's agents very quickly because things got so busy. So I think that answered the question. Sorry, I got off track.
Yeah, I think so. Teresa is asking, of the 12 sales agents that you have, how often do you hire brand new agents versus agents that have some experience, and how do you do your training?
I mean, when my first buyer's agent I hired in 2009, and I was the only person, not only in my office, I was really the only person in LA across all brands that really had any sort of buyers. I mean, there's a few guys I knew at that point who had teams or groups. Now everyone, everyone on the call here is a group and, and associates, right? So it's a lot harder. So, I mean, the answer, Teresa, is like, we really just hire whoever we can find. It does skew more towards new agents because those are the ones who are more eager. We have the same challenges in your market. By the time, someone's doing $6 million a year, it's really hard to, give them value on a team because they're making $100K in their pocket and they don't have to report to anyone. And, we have all that mindset stuff too. So a lot of times it's new agents, and we're always hiring. Our internal standard for our size, we need to hire 1 person a month. Like we literally need to hire 12 people a year because every year people quit or they move out of town. One of our rookie of the year last year, her, right as things were like really hitting, her husband got a job transfer to New Jersey. So she's out there now. Like, so there's always someone leaving. We're constantly hiring new people, at least one a month. I would like to hire more experienced agents, but it does create different challenges. So we brought on someone in 1 year in the business with 9 sales, which is really good. But it's just a different, you have to provide a lot more for them, and they're demanding, and with all right, they should be. So it's a whole different ballgame. So if you haven't hired anyone yet, I think some experience is good. Like brand new is tough because you got to teach them how to tie their shoes. But if you can find someone who can has done 3 deals and can write a professional email, I would go with that route. That was like the context of the question. But we'll hire basically anyone who we think fits in the team and can make money.
Okay. And how much of the training do you let the office do, like Market Center, versus how much do you kind of give them this special Richard training?
Yes. We in-house basically all the training. Our office has a really aggressive training calendar. I can't let my new guys spend. I don't know if you guys do the 3-hour
Ignite.
What are they called? Ignite.
Yeah.
Right. I just can't give up my guys for 3-hour Ignite classes. We've recorded all the training that we do. I've got 15 or 20 hours of video of various people training. I've got 70 pages of scripts and other documents. And honestly, we just in-house the training, and we want to get our people on the phone as fast as possible. So we brought someone on last week. We can't do anything in person, obviously. So we gave him the training videos to watch, and hopefully within 5 or 6 days of starting, he'll be just picking up the phone and dialing. And that's if you want to learn real estate, there's no better way than just to make 500 dials a day, and then eventually go on appointments. But I don't know what that's going to look like in the short term.
And are those established standards on your teams right now of how many dials people have to do before they can get to the next level or anything of that nature?
We have problems with our employer situation here that if I tell you what to do, we create a lot of legal hazards. So,
right.
If you want to succeed, Sandy, this is what I would recommend, is that you make 500 dials a day. It's a really aggressive schedule. People usually don't do it. But at the end of the day, people are who they are, and they're going to do what they want to do internally. And you can guide them and give them some numbers to hit. one of my new guys, Duke, did 800 dials. It took me several days of prodding him to get up to that number. Guess what happened? Got a listing, closing tomorrow, right? 30 days in real estate, it's getting a paycheck. Not bad. Some people don't make 800 dials their first month and a half. Like, their result is their result. But having agents who've been on my team 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you can just see, like, they are who they are. They don't generally change over time. So there's no point in saying you have to make 500 dials, because if they're not going to do it long term, then I can't sit there every day and say make 500 dials. It's not going to happen.
Cool. So what do you think, if you had to prognosticate right now, what do you think the market's going to look like when this starts lifting?
Well, something I'm curious what you guys are seeing. Like, we're not that slow. We probably opened 4 or 5 escrows last week. We canceled more than that, but we're doing business. We did our morning Monday call a couple hours ago, and everyone had showings and offers, fewer offers out. A lot of agents had showings or virtual tours they were doing. We can now show property again in California. I'm not really sure why or what changed, but so, but we've been showing vacant properties. Everyone seemed to have a little bit going on. So I think my message is to my team, and I don't know what you guys are seeing. Maybe you guys are having a different scenario, but that people are always buying and selling real estate, right? In 2008, if you guys were in real estate then, like, I did 51 deals in 2008 as a solo agent with like a part-time assistant. I did 27 in 2007, right? And there was no point in time where that stopped. There wasn't like, oh man, I didn't have that 4-month gap of nothing. Like February 2008, I sold my first foreclosed home and sold like 3 a month after that every month for 5 years, right? So there's always business going on. What are you guys seeing there? I mean, are you more restricted or?
Currently, I mean, we're not only restricted from showing, we can't even make cold calls until September. They've basically stopped everything. So for us, it's. I mean, that being said, I think that what you're talking about in terms of calling Sphere and calling past clients is still a very effective tool. We were on a ALC call earlier today, and many of us are still filling our pipelines for when this is done by doing those calls right now. I mean, I got a $2.2 million lead out of one call last week. So there's still plenty. It's I think just going to be a longer gap till it starts.
Yeah, I think I mean, you're probably right. I think it's going to be a few months of pretty slow, and then, you know, what I tell my guys is, like, using a Seth example, is like, people are still having kids and getting married and getting divorced, and all these other things are happening, and unfortunately some of these things are happening more rapidly, and eventually the dam breaks, and, you know, there's going to be a lot of people who have pent up demand to buy or sell real estate. I would not close your mind to the process that people are going to be doing stuff today. Not a lot, but hopefully just enough that you guys can sort of get by for now. But I think at some point, I think what I've observed is that 2 weeks ago, our first full week of lockdown, it was really hard to call people and just check in and say, like, and like, what's, you know, no one wanted to buy or sell anything really. But then by last week, it was almost like, I don't know, I've been sitting in front of this stupid door for like 17 days now. It's like, I don't know, this is my new life. Like, I'm just used to it. You know, I'm used to, like, you know, everything's just sort of like, I don't know, as humans, I think we acclimate to a lot of our circumstance very quickly. People are going to be buying and selling today. We pull the MLS numbers every day. You know, there's 30 escrows a day being opened in West LA. It's probably 20% of normal, but not terrible. It's enough for us to get by. And then one day, hopefully, you know, everything's safer and better, and we'll slowly reemerge into like a regular thing. But I think people will get more and more used to doing real estate this way. I think my bigger concern, Sandy, is what happens if people get too used to doing real estate this way? It's not good for us.
That's a valid point. Seth, did you have a question? Did I see you?
And not as much of a question, but in New York, the faucet just was turned off. that
Yeah.
once it's turned back on, I personally don't see everybody jumping back in. I think you're going to see people that are desperate to sell, and bottom feeders will be the first wave. Then I think there's a normalization, and we'll see. I mean, that's just my take on when the faucet's really turned off like this. The, the majority of people won't jump right back in. Is my thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, it'll be
I think
interesting.
that's a fair guess. I mean, you guys are having it a lot worse than we are. So it's hard for me to say. Like, this is all, we were ready for like a normal recession, market slowdown 2 months ago. We were like, well, it's going to happen eventually. This, the economy can't go like this forever, and so who knows, right? But what I'm telling my guys, we used to have people have like a 20-person pipeline, 10 A's and 10 B's, and I tell people, of your 20 A's and B's, it's likely that 18 of them are now out of the market entirely. And instead, you guys should be working off of like, how do you build? Our number one goal today is to build a 50-person pipeline for whenever that is, right? You say bottom feeders, like, sounds like a little derogatory. Like, those people are going to pay your bills for the rest of 2020. Every call I have, or not every call, most of my calls with clients are like, I have cash put aside. I sold my stocks. Should I buy real estate? I'm like, well, I mean, not today, but maybe tomorrow, and we're seeing, I got my first email last week labeled desperate seller, like that's going to happen more and more. And there's, that's where your business will start. And then it'll slowly, I guess, trickle up. Right. So,
Right. I mean, the amazing thing, and I agree with you in terms of sometimes the language we use, bottom feeders and all that sort of stuff. At the same time, even if the market goes down 10, 15, 20%, in New York, and I'm assuming in LA also, that's really only turning the clock back a few years, 2-3 years. People have still made a significant amount of money since the last cycle. So yeah. I don't know that it's, necessarily all that fair to say to people, hey, you're just trying to screw people over by lowball. No, that's what the market is right now.
That's the market, right?
Yeah.
I'm just giving Seth a hard time, but yeah.
Yeah.
and I will say, whatever the change is, the initial people that come in will try to push that lower. That's where it's feeding on other people's misfortune. And I'm not saying it's every investment cycle. I think it maybe will normalize to 15, but the first wave will be people trying to get 25.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think you're 100% right.
And the way I built my business is in 2008, when I did those 51 deals, it was probably 45 foreclosed buyer deals. I spent the last 12 years relisting those properties for 3 and 4 times what they had sold for back then. And that's an enormous amount of free money. So that's where the opportunity is building those relationships and doing those deals.
Correct. Couple of kind of last questions before we see if anybody else has some questions. I'm curious, during this time, well, how much have you adopted into Command and Kelly so far? And are you using this opportunity to do a deeper dive into it?
So we haven't adopted yet. We're still being told that since we have more than 7 agents that we should not be on Command yet. But I have 2 of my admins sort of like exploring and playing around so that we'll be familiar. So I don't know yet. I would like to switch now if we could, but they're telling us we're too big for Command right now.
Yeah, we're in the same boat.
But I think otherwise, this is a great opportunity. If you have a team smaller than 7, this is probably the time to migrate your database. We did a database migration 2.5 years ago, and we, you literally, even though there's software that does this migration for you, we literally went almost one by one, lead for lead, to double check everything was correct. And that gives you an opportunity to sort of like check every lead and then call and text and email each person while you're doing it. So, I mean, you got almost nothing else to do, right? We're locked in our houses, so make the best use of it.
Yep. So my last question for you is, we're both in Gary's Top Agent Mastermind. I'm curious to know, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest, takeaways that you've gotten from being in that group, or being, hearing from Gary on a higher level that you could share with us?
Okay, good question. That wasn't on our approved pre-questions list, so let me think about the second
I
part.
know, I like to throw a curveball at you.
You know the thing that the first popped in my head that's most resonant with me, and it's easier for us in a high price point market, is getting to know people, and there's some sort of like confidential sharing of profit and loss numbers. I was stunned at the range of profitability that you see in there. I mean, you see people who have enormous. I mean, I did 125 million last year in sales approximately. That probably puts me like, maybe just north of average for the group. There's an enormous range of profitability between, 0 and a lot. And so I think what I've learned there is what's most important is to focus on the bottom line number, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And I think a lot of us are chasing like, I want to do, someone's on this call like, I want to do 125 million. Like, maybe, in your market, doing 40 million with one assistant is probably also a pretty good way to get to the same result, right?
Right.
So that's definitely number one. What was the second part of the question?
No, just what were some of the big ahas that you've gotten from being in the group?
That's really the biggest one. It's really the one that really sticks with me. I can't think of anything else like just sort of simplified like that.
Yep.
I think just listening to Gary, I quote Gary a lot. I just listening to Gary talk about everything. I think what Gary says, he does two quotes I'll give you here that I like. One is he says something along the lines of like, I'm not the smartest guy out there, but I am the most focused guy, which you probably could hear from the One Thing book, which I think is a really interesting thing. It really helped me focus on just one lever of lead gen versus like open houses, cold calling, circle dialing, farm prospecting. And the other thing he says is that massive success is getting really comfortable with the minutia. That's not the exact quote, but the idea being that like, if you say, Gary, how are you so successful? He's like, well, I'm the most focused person and like, I go in and like, I live the one thing. Like I go in the morning and I do my top 20 and then that's everything else comes from that. And so I think if you can just, and those seem like overly simple. I'm sure like 90% of the people on the call are like, well, duh. But like, just like hear it over and over and listen it and try to live it every day. You really find those results. Like I've been in the group 6 years. I've worked less and less each year on my primary sales business, and I've earned more and more each year. Maybe not this year, but the other year. So just every day trying to be 1% better at being more focused on my top 20 and being, laser focused on profitability.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe type into the chat box or something, your email address in case people have questions or something?
Yeah. I'm pretty wide open the next few weeks. If anyone has any questions, I'll be sitting right here all day. I'm looking for a new New York referral agent too. So if you guys have any referrals out here, you could earn the business. So
wait, what did I give you? 6 million in the last 2 years?
Sandy, mute Seth, please.
Yeah.
Rude Seth. I put my info in there. I'm happy just to chat if you guys have questions, and I hope you guys all do well. There's nothing more important than our health, and I mean certainly it's something that you guys are all experiencing, like something we as a team and me personally never thought about really this seriously until like the last few weeks. So
yeah.
But also selling real estate's important too, right?
Thank you, Richard.
Best wishes, everyone, and
Thank you,
hopefully I'll
Richard.
talk to you soon. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.